The Navigating Disability podcast often discusses topics including disability, injury, mental health, and mentions of sensitive issues such as trauma and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care while listening. Welcome to the Navigating Disability podcast. Today we're joined by Fiona Demark, an adventure junkie and passionate disability advocate. Fiona can overcome any obstacle. She just may not see it coming. Legally blind since birth, Fiona has embraced a positive mindset to navigate a sighted world. An expert on ability thinking, Fiona was a Holman Prize Top 10 finalist, author of Broken Hill, The Broken Road to Becoming Whole, and serves on the leadership team of Professional Speakers Australia. She'll take your audience on an unforgettable journey, not just as fast as the 160 kilometres an hour she hit at Sandown. After Fiona, you'll never see the world the same way. What an introduction. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about what, I'm going to say your disability, whether or not that's how you see it, and I think that was a really bad pun.
Love it.
Tell me about your disability and how it occurred, if it was from birth, a little bit about your journey.
Yep, cool. So let's start off with getting the elephant out of the room. Yes, I do call it a disability. And you know what? I think, lots of people like to refer to themselves with different uses of words and definitions. But I like the idea of everyone knows what a disability is. And look, to be honest, yes, sometimes my condition is disabling. So therefore, yes, it is a disability. Doesn't mean that that's what I identify as being who I am, but it's certainly part of who I am, and it's certainly part of who I've become.
I love that.
Having said that, yes, I have been with this condition since birth. So it's a recessive genetic condition. So it kind of just pops up randomly here and there. So I've got two sisters. One has the condition, the one in the middle doesn't, and then me being the youngest, I do as well. And it was something that, look, I grew up in far western New South Wales, right out on the South Australian border, basically. And in those times, I guess our resources were really poor. We had to go to Adelaide, which was still 5.5 hours away, and that was our closest capital city. And that's where any kind of medical treatments were available. So it took them a really, really long time to even pinpoint an exact diagnosis. But because the sister that's 13 years older had been through all of this process before me, I guess it made my journey a little easier, but didn't, stop that brutal conversation of, maybe I was 5 or 6. I remember the eye specialist saying, well, you're going to go blind. And I'm like, well, that's lovely. And so how that was going to happen, when it was going to happen, how I was going to experience that was completely unknown. But they said, okay, well, in this particular batch of retinal diseases that we don't even really know what we're dealing with, but it's one of these, and in most instances that does result in total blindness at some stage. So I guess for me, I've always had that in the back of my mind that I was going to have to live my life and adapt in different ways, and if I wanted to do things in the future, that potentially they weren't going to look the same as everybody else. Now, I use those same puns. I obviously grew up with more vision than what I do. And so, as most people, I probably grew up as quite a visual kind of person, picked up all the same language. And even though I don't live in a visual world, I'm certainly not offended by see, look, all of those words that we just naturally use.
Yeah. So how did that, growing up, knowing that you're going to go blind, but they don't know, they couldn't tell you when, how did you navigate that? Knowing that it's going to happen, but you don't know when, because I'm guessing it would have a lot of anxiety attached to it. But as a child, how did you navigate that, being so young?
Yeah, look, in some ways, I think I just stored it away in the back of my brain and just went, yeah, well, you know what? Like, let's just deal with what's happening right now. And in some instances, yes, the low vision definitely did impact upon things like my schooling. Like, I couldn't read blackboards and overhead projectors and things like that. So we did need to adapt things. And of course, sports day and whatever. And unfortunately, back in those days, the school system wasn't particularly adaptable. So that definitely, took a bit of wrangling. But in terms of everyday mobility and things like that, as a general rule, most of the time I was okay. I've always had what's considered, they call it night blindness. So anywhere where it's a really dark area or obviously at night time, my vision was always severely impacted. So I guess had people looking out for me, and I didn't realize until sort of, fairly recently within the last 5 years or so, I guess how much responsibility that poor middle sister had, because she's sort of, in the middle of our ages. So she's 7 years older than I am. So she was probably being eyes to big sister and little sister and trying to live her life as well at times. So there was probably always someone that was looking out for me when I was young. And so the impact wasn't really that huge. And I don't think I've ever really experienced anxiety over the loss of my vision. And I think maybe it's because it was just always there. It was always this known thing. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, we don't know quite how it's going to happen, but the expectation was set really early on.
Were you born with low vision and then it slowly got worse, or were
Yes.
you born with full vision and then it slowly got worse?
No, so it was always low vision. So for your daily, everyday kind of activities, I would probably say maybe about 40% loss, 50% loss, something like that. I mean, it's hard to guess because I never really knew what it was like to compare to. But yeah, it wasn't as hugely impactful when I was young. Could still read normal size print and things like that up until I was about 16. So I sort of only really needed to adapt, to doing things differently for maybe senior high school. And then, of course, university and things like that. As time went by, my eyesight just deteriorated and got worse. I've probably, look, if I'm lucky, I've probably got 5% left now, but that's always guesswork because after you can't read the chart anymore, it's just kind of like a bit of a stab in the dark kind of thing.
So can I ask with five, and this is me being naive because and I'm very curious, what can you see? Like with 5%, do you just see shapes or shadows or just blur?
And look, it's a really interesting question. And you think by nearly 50, I would have I'd
Yeah,
have my
sorry, I'm
answer all
just
sorted
curious.
out, but no.
Yeah, oh,
Look, it's got very much to do with light conditions. So the
right.
brighter the lights are, you take me out in natural sunshine or where things really contrast. So the most fabulous thing, and this is a bit of a probably terrifying story for many people, is when I go riding on the back of my husband's motorbike, like, you see people lean over as they go around the corners. I can see those white lines on the side of the road really clearly out of the corner of my eye because I've got better peripheral vision than I do front on. And so those white lines on the side of the road seem to come really, really close sometimes when we go around the corners. And so they're things that I can still kind of see where, yeah, if we think about sort of, faces and sort of other stuff, not so much.
Has there been a time where you've really found the lack of eyesight as a disadvantage, like it's not fair and you were angry and it really disabled you, whether it was
Mm.
physically or mentally?
Yeah, look, I mean, it probably happens to some aspect every day. Like, there's probably something in every day that I face that I just go, okay, well, that'd be better if I could see. And I don't even know whether I consciously think about it. It's probably just that subconscious thing in my brain going, oh, okay, well, you can't do that way, so you need to do it a different way. And there's certainly times where I think, oh gosh, it'd be great to wave that magic wand. I think the time that I struggled with it most of all was when I was a teenager. I did, literally hit rock bottom and build that foundation of finding myself again. And, some of that was just because I was a teenager and we all go through our teenage, you know, problems. There was a lot of other stuff going on when I was that age as well, and I did probably develop a bit of a mental health issue. Not that it was ever specifically diagnosed. But yeah, look, it took a lot of reassessing and yeah, like just realizing how I could turn it around. And instead of saying, okay, well, these are the things that I can't do, well, what can I do? And one of the things that I discovered, and it was such I guess, like the conversation didn't mean anything so much at the time, but with reflection, it literally changed my life. Was I had a conversation with one of my teachers, and we were talking about my poor mental health. And, he said, oh, well, is this conversation about you or is it about other people? And in that moment, I kind of questioned and I went, you know what? Like, potentially there's other people that experiencing their own dramas of life and whatever they happen to be, maybe my experiences give me some kind of understanding and empathy and a power that I can then use as something that I can help other people with. And so that was the point where I decided, okay, well, yes, being a journalist is probably unrealistic because back then I didn't have the resources and the supports to help me. But maybe let's become a social worker instead. And in that instance, use some of my own experiences and hardships to be able to help other people. And that pretty much literally changed my life.
Are you able to tell us about a time when you surprised yourself by achieving something you thought you never could?
Look, I think probably one of the things that I questioned a lot was the choice to become a parent. I think everyone questions that a little bit and it has those dramas of thinking, oh my gosh, what if things go wrong? What if there's an emergency? Do I have the personal skills to be able to cope with being a parent? Sometimes it can be really hard. For me, I obviously had to factor in disability on top of that. And, I couldn't just jump in the car and take the kid to wherever it needed to go, to play dates, to school, to, the emergency room if it needed to happen. And so then it was like, well, do I or don't I? And then, of course, there was always that shadow of doubt in the back of my mind, even though the possibility of passing on the genetic disease that, was extremely rare, that there was still a possibility of that happening. And I'm like, what happens here? And in essence, I thought, well, you know what? Like I've adapted to everything else in my life. Why shouldn't I adapt to this as well? And so, in essence, I've got two beautiful daughters that have grown up to be lovely young women. They're now 19 and 21. And look, yes, their life has been different due to my disability, but that's not necessarily a negative thing. Yes, sometimes we had to think outside of the box and work out that, okay, well, gymnastics practice was in the industrial estate, and how do we make that happen because there's no public transport? But then, having said that, the other things are that they are really kind and empathetic and considerate of other people themselves because they have experienced something different in life. So I think we, again, always have this opportunity to say, well, I can't do that and there's a disadvantage, but then you can always flip it on your head and say, okay, well, what can we do instead? Or what is the positive that we can bring out of this? Because, adversity will always bring, some kind of growth and strength.
I love that. Going back to the decision to have children,
Hmm.
and you talked about your own decision, how did that affect your husband or your partner at the time? Did they leave the decision up to you or?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I mean, it would have definitely been something that we communicated and then worked out, okay, well, what things do we need to do differently? And to be honest, there wasn't that much realistically that we had to adapt to. Like one of the things is I formula fed, for example. And so we used to just prepare the sterilized bottles the night before because obviously he'd go off to work and I was on maternity leave. And so it was okay, well, I obviously can't see to pour the water into the baby's bottle and get it at the right milliliter level. So we just used to do it the day before and say, okay, well, it just sits there overnight. And then it was just like, put the formula in, warm it up, we're good to go. So little things like that, we just worked out the adaptations. So it wasn't that I couldn't do things. It was just that we had to, maybe think outside of the square and go, okay, well, how do they work differently?
You had to do them differently.
Yeah.
So when your babies were born, they're not babies anymore, but in mama's eyes, they are.
As they will always be, yes.
Absolutely. Were you able to see their faces clearly? I know that's a personal question,
No,
but
no, and absolutely. And today, I probably still look, I mean, yeah, like I mean, I probably still imagine them
Oh,
with
yeah.
those little girl faces. So, look, I probably lost being able to see their faces clearly maybe only 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago. So they were still sort of like I mean, they'd done quite a bit of growing by the time I probably can't see their faces anymore.
Yeah.
So, having said that, like I've got the memory of what that first bit looked like. And look, you just kind of, I don't know, adapt and imagine. It's
Yeah.
very different when you've seen somebody and you can go, okay, well, I imagine what this looks like now versus meeting somebody for the first time today and having to imagine everything.
Yeah.
And there's got to be bonuses again if we're looking at the positives to this. I missed out on all of those teenage eye rolls and
And they
you know
come very quick and fast, let me tell you.
and look, sometimes I believe that you can probably hear them just as clearly as you can see them because I definitely knew that they happened. But yeah, look, I think and again, like, I was very lucky in the sense that my daughters didn't ever take advantage of my disability either. So, they knew that I had super hearing and super other senses in the sense that, even though I couldn't necessarily see what they were doing, I always had an understanding of what was going on. So it was like, they didn't ever do well, yes, mum, we've cleaned the room. And in fact, they actually hadn't because they knew that I had my own technique of going in and checking it.
From talking to you, Fiona, you're a very positive person. Where has that come from?
I think just look, and it hasn't always been the case, and certainly don't get me wrong. Like there's days that I wake up and I just want to pull that doona over my head, like we all do. But as a general rule, I think it probably started off with my dad being a really resilient and adaptive person. And, so starting to instill those things into me when I was very young. And look, I just think from my own personal experiences, I have a more fun and exciting and interesting life when I look at the positives. And instead of going, oh, okay, well, that's bad. Look, I mean, bad stuff happens. And of course, you've got to acknowledge it at the time. But then it's like, okay, well, how long do I want to stay in this spot? Because it's up to me to make that decision. And, that was one of the most powerful things I learned. And I learned when I was into doing my social work degree and studying psychology. And that philosophy of, we are the ones that are in control of our reactions and our behaviors and our decisions. So it doesn't matter what happens to us, the same thing can happen to five different people, and you're going to get five different reactions or behaviors or outcomes from that same situation. And at the end of it all, it's our choice. It's our choice to say,
True.
okay, well, I can deal with this and see it as a negative and see it as a bad thing, or I can take the opportunity to go, well, you know what, that wasn't ideal. However, let's keep moving.
So as we know, Fiona, sometimes the world is so slow to catch up with people with a disability. How have you navigated societal perceptions over the years?
Um, Look, I think in some essences, and it's really interesting because we go back to this whole visible slash invisible disability thing. And I guess for if you just look at me, you can't tell that I've got a disability. Like unless I've got my white stick out, like I don't have, my eyes don't look different to anybody else's in the sense that I've learned to do the whole eye contact thing and whatever else. And so a lot of the times people don't even realize that I've got a disability out in public, especially if I'm, using my human guide dog husband as my sighted guide, because then it's like, oh, okay, well, you guys are just holding hands. Like, you don't even notice that there's a problem. And then other times I do use the white cane and then, oh, okay, well, now you kind of feel like you're in a different basket. And I think I've just become really good at self-advocating. I've taught my husband to be really good at advocating as well, in the sense that, if we are somewhere and I do have the white cane, for example, or we've already explained, well, to a shop person, for example, like if we're, in the shopping centre buying clothes, we'll explain and say, okay, well, I need to touch it because I can't see it. And then if the shop person then starts addressing the person that's with me, for example, and says, oh, does she need this? Does she need that? Then, my husband is great at sort of handballing that back and going, hang on, no, 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 she's your customer, talk to her. So having said that, I think I don't know. Look, I go in it with the philosophy of you don't know what you don't know. And maybe people haven't ever experienced someone in my situation before. Maybe people haven't, they just don't feel comfortable. Maybe they've had a bad experience before with somebody that has a disability. And so there's all of these things that I sort of think, okay, well, let's go at it with the angle of I will advocate for myself, I will try and educate, and at the same time, just understand where people are coming from instead of having that expectation that just because my life is impacted by disability doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else's is. And so therefore to give people that bit of leeway and go, you know what? Like, okay, let's learn together.
I was just going to say to you, it's almost like you have a teaching role, whether you
Mm,
like it or
mm.
not, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have exposure to people with
Mm.
disabilities, and they don't know how to react or how
Yeah.
to
And,
handle.
and look, I think we've become really mindful as a society of what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate and what you can and can't say. And to some extent, I think that's then kind of scared people off from feeling that they can ask questions and learn and be in a position where they say, you know what, I don't know, can you tell me? Because I think they're going to offend somebody.
Absolutely. And one thing we have been that's a regular occurrence through these chats is most people with a disability are more than welcome, more than willing to answer questions. So
Mm,
don't be afraid to ask those
Mm.
questions.
yeah, absolutely.
Can I go
As long
back?
as as long as it's asked in a, a respectful manner. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I have heard other people that have had horror stories of people sort of, asking very inappropriate questions.
Yeah.
And, but it's the same. Like, I mean, you wouldn't go and ask somebody that you don't know any kind of really personal, inappropriate question. So why would you do it of someone with a disability? But I mean, to be respectful and ask some questions to say, well, how can I help you better? Is there anything I can do? Then that opens that conversation to say, okay, I'm willing to learn.
And also to, if someone with a disability says, no, thank you, I'm okay,
Mm,
to accept that because they're okay and they
that's
know
right.
what they
Yeah.
need.
Yep.
Can we
And
go
again, I've heard horror stories, and this hasn't ever personally happened to me, but I've heard horror stories of, people who like low vision waiting at traffic lights, and someone has decided that the traffic lights are now green, let's go. And they take them and then they dump them on the other side of the road, and it's actually not even where that person needed to be.
Oh, that's not
So you've
Oh,
actually just confused them even more.
Can I take you back to the time that you went to uni, studied social work and so forth?
Mhm.
How did you find that?
Look, I think it was really interesting. And again, look, I mean, one of the things that I did learn from it was the skill of public speaking. And look, I was terrified. I spent my whole high school years, like, I mean, kids were nasty. I was bullied. I was one of those people that just kind of wanted to disappear into the background. Don't imagine that now because obviously I've totally done a complete, 360 on that. But having said that, when I got to university, it was like, oh, okay, well, now you have to be an adult. And I moved literally a week after my 18th birthday. So I left my little country town and went to Sydney. And look, I did have some people that I knew there from going to teenage recreational camps, but as a whole, I was living by myself, doing it all on my own. And yeah, look, it taught me to grow up and to be able to assert myself and to find my own power, I think. And the beauty of that was is there was nobody that knew my old identity. So I had this opportunity to kind of reinvent myself. And that gave me the capacity to go, well, you know what? Like I can be whoever I want to be, and I don't have to fall into that old Fiona. I can now be the new Fiona, and I can get out there and I can live my life the way that I want it to be rather than having all of those other things. And so that was the time where I did start to really learn to advocate for myself and work out what it was that I wanted in life and what was important to me.
can I ask what one of the most valuable lessons you've learned from living with your disability that you think everyone could benefit from?
Just be kind to yourself because
Yeah.
there's times where you realistically can't do stuff that maybe other people can do. But you know what? That's okay. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be unique. And if your disability is the thing that makes you different and unique, that's part of who you are. And instead of trying to, chop that part off and go, oh no, it's bad, it's awful, I don't want to think about it, to actually go, well, you know what? Like, if I look at it in a way of I've got different things, different attributes, different things that I can do that other people can't do, or a different way of looking at life because I understand things differently because of my own disability, then that is really powerful in itself. Because I mean, quite often, just in general daily stuff, I mean, we're really mean to ourselves. And
Mm.
so to actually stop that and go, you know what? Would I say that to my best friend? Would I expect that somebody else would say that to me? No. So why am I saying it to myself? And sort of to just be kind and understanding and go, you know what? Today might not be a great day, but tomorrow, well, we wake up, we go again.
If there was a time, if you looked back and you could see a person that had a disability that was really struggling with where they were, what would you say to them?
Again, just be really kind to yourself. Take little steps at a time. Sometimes that big picture, although it's nice to have big, lifetime goals, sometimes it is really about just taking one baby step at a time and going, you know what? I just need to get through the next little part. And that's not necessarily related to disability. It could be related to anything that we struggle with. Like sometimes breaking it down into those tiny little steps is the way that we can manage to get our way through some of those things that challenge us. And I think reach out to other people that understand. You're not alone. You're not there to do it all by yourself. And that was one of the hardest things I guess I had to learn is people actually do want to help you. They do want to support you. And it's not just because of your disability. People actually just want to be kind. And sometimes we need to remember to give people the opportunity to do that for us because, we're all very independent and strong and all of these things and think that we can do all of the things all of the time. And none of us can do that, regardless of whether that's created by disability, whether it's created by the fact that you've just got too many things on your plate, whatever it happens to be. Like if somebody offers you help, it's actually really nice for them to accept it.
So what does the future hold for you, Fiona? What have you got in the pipeline with regards to your talking and motivational speaking, that type of stuff?
Look, I can see myself on, world stages sharing the positive message with, thousands, millions of people, yeah? And, that will grow in time. And in the meantime, you know what? It's about helping whoever I can along the way and also just living my best life. Like, I'm here to do what I can to help other people, but at the same time, it's about making sure that I have fun doing it. And so to go and experience the world, go and see new places, go and experience new things. I've got this little philosophy of, if an opportunity pops up, let's do it as long as, it's not totally unrealistic. It's like, okay, well, give it a go. If it turns out, it turns out. If it didn't, it didn't. But at least then I don't look back and go, oh, well, what if I had have tried that? I don't want to have regrets in my life. I'm very much, let's give it a go and see what happens. And if it's a disaster, we just know don't go there again.
And it happens so often, doesn't it? We live in the what ifs because we're too
Yeah.
scared to, step outside the box. But
Yeah. And you know what? Like so often we say, "Oh, we want to be comfortable." What do you want from your life? Oh, I want to be comfortable. Comfortable's boring, yeah? It's like, if you don't have that little bit of discomfort, that little bit of thing that just makes you go, "Whoa, this is a bit scary," then you don't grow. But you know what? Those times where you do step outside of that comfort zone, those times that you go into that scary place and you achieve something that feels amazing. They're the moments that you're proud of. They're the things that you go, whoa, I didn't think I could do that, but look at me.
And that leads me into what is the scariest, most outrageous thing that you've done?
Jet skiing, terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I've been at 300 kilometers an hour on the back of my husband's motorbike several times. And so my theory was a jet ski is just going to be like a motorbike in the water. It'll be fine, no worries. Yeah, boy, was I wrong. I didn't take into account that A, I don't swim very well, so water kind of terrifies me a little bit. Like if I go for a swim in the ocean, I only go out sort of like knee height. So I'm like, well, now now I'm in the middle of the ocean, and I didn't factor in the fact that it bounces like every time you hit a wave, like boing, boing, boing. I swear I left my finger marks in that jet ski.
Every time I ride a jet ski, my hands go numb because I'm holding on for dear life.
But how do you feel having done that now?
And look, even when we went back at the end of the session, handed in the jet ski, and they're like, "How was it?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." They go, "You do it again?" And I'm like, "Never say never." But I'm not sure I'd go back there in a hurry. I'd be much more like, okay, what's the waves like? What's the weather like? You know, sussing out all of the things that I now know. But having said that, look, it was an experience and I'm proud of the fact that I did it. And you know what? It was fun because, my husband and I went with my younger daughter and her best friend. And so that's memories now.
Yeah.
So even though it was terribly scary, it's still part of something that I can file away and go, well, you know what? That was fun.
Yeah.
As we start to wrap up, Fiona, what are your hopes for the future with regards to the disability community, people? What do you want to see change?
I think it'd be nice for people to just be accepted for who they are. Look, I know as human beings, we like to put people in a box and go, okay, well, I can identify you by putting you in this box, or this box. And I think we've become so enhanced by all of the different factors that make up who we are now that it becomes very hard to put people in boxes. And I think if we just treat everybody with kindness and respect, no matter who they are, no matter what their background is, just take them for the moment. And if they're a nice person and they're doing the right thing, then, it's that whole theory of, treat others the way you would expect to be treated yourself. And I think there's a lot of energy in that, in the sense that, just be kind to people and understand, okay, well, I don't necessarily have to know everything about you. I don't necessarily have to know how to solve the problems of your world. I just need to be able to be nice to you right now. And if you need some kind of assistance, to be able to provide that to you. And if not, then to just treat you like everybody else that I meet, instead of trying to say, oh, okay, well, you're different and I need to do something bigger or better, or kind of change the way you're dealing with people.
Just accept you for who you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
What a beautiful way
Well,
to end. Thank you so much for your time, Fiona, and sharing your life story. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could go into. We will put all your details up so that people can reach out if they feel that way. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
thanks,
you.
Fiona.
Thank you.